Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part there for the 18th of October 2024. Please hang around for the rest of the day with me. I'll be pumping out lots of videos, of course, but I am going to have a live stream with Jake Bro. He's coming on the channel to have a chat about his views on the war in Ukraine at the moment. So much is going on, so much geopolitically. The world is an interesting place at the moment, and that is a pretty horrific understatement. And we're going to be talking through that. So please join us at 6 p.m. UK time, 8 p.m. Kiev time, and another time in America and elsewhere in the world. So work it out. That's when I'm doing it. Check it out. Right. Let's go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, or the usual caveats apply, and you can find them in the description to the video below. So just in case you want to make the time to have a whinge as to why I'm not doing X and why I am believing Y, and it's all down there. Just go and check it out. Okay, right. We have the Ukrainian general staff figures saying some pretty hefty numbers, claiming some pretty hefty numbers in a number of these categories. 1,530 personnel lost. Let's go and have a look at the 7-day rolling average on Dell's spreadsheet. Remember, that is linked in the description to the video below. You guys can always check this out, and he updates it every day. So we have the 18th of October. We have 1,530 personnel lost. Yesterday, 1,420. Day before, 1,450. Then in the 1,200s and the 1,300s before that. Let's just have a look at what the 7-day rolling average is at the moment. 7-day rolling average for personnel lost is 1,351. So that is really significant. The 7-day rolling average is above the 1,300 average, 1,300 top of the range I normally talk about. I normally talk about 1,000 to 1,300 being where we are seeing things at the moment. But this last week has been particularly heavy. You can see that in that 7-day rolling average. The highest 7-day rolling average is 1,451, but that is high. And our 30-day rolling average is about on the record. So 30-day rolling average is 1,293 personnel lost on average every day for 30 days. The highest is 1,295. So it is right on the money there for being a very bad month, really, for Russian losses. Vehicles and fuel tanks lost 93 today. The highest is 115, but that is a really high number. In fact, the 7-day rolling average there is 72.86, which is really high. And the 30-day rolling average is 10.80. Sorry, 70.80, which is almost the record, 70.97. So this last month has been particularly bad for a number of these categories. Quite incredible. Okay, so we'll go back to the daily figures here. 13 tanks above the daily average, so that's significant because I think there have been times where tank losses have been right down near zero or 3 or 4 around there, and to get them back up to twice the daily average yesterday and again above the daily average today, I think means that there's a lot going on. 51 troop carrying AFVs is an incredibly high number in that category, really signifying some activity there for sure, especially when you put that together with 93 vehicles and fuel tanks. 2 pieces of special equipment, 23 artillery systems, so that is above the daily average, but it's not a particularly high number as we are used to. But just in terms of these 4 categories, I think that signifies the Russians are throwing an awful lot at the Ukrainians. And the idea is for the last couple of days of really high figures, again, if we go to the daily loss figures, we go to look at what has happened over the last few days. We have seen very high stats across all of these main categories that you would expect if the Russians were attacking and therefore losing lots of vehicles and equipment and people. So what we should expect with a couple of days lag is that actually Andrew Perpetua's loss list should be bad today. I haven't seen it yet, but that would be my prediction. I've put it in here. I've just copied and pasted. I haven't opened it up. So let's have a look. That's exactly what we see. My goodness. So that is a 5-to-1, maybe even 6-to-1 equipment loss ratio Russian to. This is a really bad day for the Russians. Russian to Ukrainian losses. On combat asset losses, so that's going from the top of the turquoise down to the bottom of the orange. Here, that is about 4-to-1, maybe 5-to-1 Russian to Ukrainian losses. In other words, the Ukrainian General Staff figures, certainly in terms of trends, are being borne out by Andrew Perpetua's visually confirmed loss list with geolocated data. Right, so this is definitely what has happened. Right, there are links to every one of these when you go and look at the original document. So beneath this, he always puts the document, the sources. If you click on that, I have to do this because there are newbies that always are popping by and joining in, and they might not know this. So for each one of these, you have the visually confirmed source, and then that gets geolocated as well, although that you won't see that on this data sheet. So this is definitely happening, right? The Russians have definitely lost these, and the Ukrainians have definitely lost these. The question is, yeah, and that's what's been noted on that particular day. It doesn't mean that equipment necessarily was lost the day before. It's just that it appeared on social media on that day. So some of it might be old, and occasionally he will note down the side that this is an old one. But generally speaking, that kind of averages out over time. So generally speaking, this is what has happened. One would assume, broadly speaking, 2 days previously. Okay, Ukrainian losses. Now let's look to see if there's anything of particularly high value here. So Ukrainians have lost the radar. Well, at least it's been damaged. Don't know what the radar is, so might be significant, or it might be something small like an ANTPQ-50, some kind of small radar on the back of a Humvee or something like that. 3 tanks, all T-64 BVs. Now, if we look at the combat asset losses, they are almost all destroyed and abandoned. So that's bad news. But the good news is there's not many of them. So that will skew that kind of data that conclusion really. So that it's really bad proportion. Yeah, but actually there's only there's not even 10 pieces of combat asset losses there. So that aside, we do have a CV90 40C. So these are the combat vehicles, the infantry fighting vehicles provided by the Swedes. This is a particularly good IFV. Some people say it's the best in the world. So that has been destroyed. That is going to be a bit of an annoying loss for the Ukrainians for sure. And then M113 Oshkosh, captured Oshkosh and MRAP. Interesting. Max Pro BTRs, so usual kind of stuff there, and some civilian vehicles. Not really an awful lot of. I don't know why that AFV is thrown down there. Oh, So when they are purple, that's a BRDM2 that's been blown up, right? Unknown cause, because both sides use them, and when they are so fundamentally destroyed, real burnt out husks, you can't tell, and it's in the contact zone. You can't tell whose side that particular vehicle was on. So it could have been either, so that's why that's in purple. And then we have civilian vehicles being driven by civilians being blown up, or owned by civilians. Okay, so the Ukrainians not really losing too much to worry about apart from that CV90. Coming up to the Russian losses, quite a lot of surveillance and comms equipment. Not so important for me. Engineering vehicle, a few bits of artillery, including a D20 and D30, showing that they are still losing these, or they're losing these older bits of kit. Right, tanks, about 10 tanks, half of them abandoned and damaged, or 60% of them. We have T80s, T62s, and then most of them are unknown tanks. Infantry fighting vehicles, probably 20 of these. Range of BMP 1s, 2s, 3s, BTRs, those kind of things. Most of them destroyed and abandoned. APCs, about a dozen of these, most of these destroyed and abandoned. We have some BTRs, NTLBs. Seen quite a few of these recently. ZSTS Akhmat. Not quite sure what that is. ZSTS Akhmat. ZSTS Akhmat are the Chechen Special Forces, and that's what that looks like. First by Remdiesel Akhmat Z STS. Okay, interesting. So these are Chechen vehicles showing that they are involved in quite a bit of military activity. Chechen is the first by the Akhmat Z STS armored vehicle of Remdiesel. And yeah, I wonder who Remdiesel are. I don't know if that is. So let's look at Remdiesel and see if they are a Western firm. Don't about the company. No, they're Russian. Look like they're a Russian firm. So there you go. Okay, so that sorry to do that live, but that just gives us an idea what they are. But as you can see, after this we've got a lot of ATVs, four wheelers, a lot of civilian vehicles, cars, SUVs, pickups, loads, and a few things like I've said cars already, but some Lada Nivas there. I even know what car it is. So okay. It's just a massive equipment loss. The Russians having a bad day at the office there, and that signifies that there is a lot of offensive activity going on from the Russians. They're throwing lots against the Ukrainians, but losing lots as well. The question is that cost worth the reward? So the amount of land that they're getting, it's costing them that much stuff. Is it worth them doing that? Andrew Perpetua is also with his team counting up the visually confirmed dead bodies that they see. I mean, it sounds pretty macabre, but actually it's being done for, again, trying to work out if the trends that they see on visually confirmed, from their visually confirmed data, if they are reflected at all with what the Ukrainian general staff are saying. What does it say about the actual losses? So these are visually confirmed losses. So you can say that Russia has definitely lost these amounts of troops over the last however long. And it gives us, I think, it is an important data set. It gives us an idea of what's going on. He said we've cracked 5,000 dead in 54 days. So he's been doing this for 54 days, and he's seen 5,000 people die or dead. So these are Russian troops. They are definitely dead. 54 days. So if the Russians give their lost stats officially, and it's, for example, I mean, it's not going to be this, but if they said it was below 5,000, because of course they said earlier on in the war that they'd lost 6,000, but you would say, right, you are definitely lying, because we know for sure there is visual confirmation of 5,000 dead Russian soldiers. But of course, you are only going to get a fraction of the actual dead soldiers happening on a day caught on camera, right? A tiny fraction, because first and foremost, when you have, say, an infantry fighting vehicle with 10 people inside, or an APC with 20 people inside, and that gets blown up, and imagine all 20 people died, generally that's going to be caught on camera. They are inside the vehicle and it blows up, and etc., etc. Or if you have a strike on a barracks, or if you have a dugout that's blown up, you're very rarely really going to see the Russian soldiers dying. Thankfully, it's very macabre, but as far as just thinking in terms of raw data and not the human element to this, you are going to see a very small percentage of the actual deaths on a daily basis. Now, he is now saying that it's averaging about 93 a day. So when you look at these numbers and you say, well, they're 1,530, this is killed, wounded, deserted, and caught, taken prisoner. He's saying, well, about 100 of those are visually confirmed deaths a day. And we've seen that for the last 54 days. And he was saying the other day that actually in reality what they see, well, what they have been seeing previously was 100 to 150. So that he was quite surprised that there have been some quieter days recently when that was his understanding. But anyway, interesting stuff from Andrew there again. Right, when we look at some of the footage, there's quite a lot of footage coming out. Just some major ones like the 79th Brigade repelling a massive Russian attack, engaging 33 units of armoured vehicles. So there was this time period where the Russians were only using 2s and 3s, maybe 5 vehicles to do these attacks, often single vehicles. And I was saying, look, it's been a long time since we've seen, say, 30 vehicles attacked like we saw in at the beginning of the Avdiivka offensive, where the Russians took Avdiivka. We're starting to see that a few times again at the moment. 33 units of armoured vehicles, a total of 27 infantry fighting vehicles and 6 tanks attempted to breach the defence of the 79th Brigade near Konstantinivka. The paratroopers destroyed 11 armoured vehicles and 3 tanks while damaging 3 more and taking out a Terminator, a rare Terminator support vehicle. So the Terminator is this, it's the same chassis as the T14, is it? No, I don't know, it's all T90, but anyway, no, I'm going to be scrap what I said there. But anyway, it is one of their chassis that has these. Well, it can have different, I believe, armaments on top, but quite often you see them with these really powerful auto cannons. We saw them totally taking out areas of the forest up down depending on where you are, Serebyansky Forest. We have seen a number of these taken out. They are quite rare. They were held up as these It's called a support vehicle, I presume here, because the idea is you use them as you go into urban areas to support your troops as they're going in, rather than out in the open so much. So here it is, the BMPT Terminator, and we'll have a little look at this. So it's designed for supporting tanks and other AFVs in urban areas. So exactly that. The BMPT is unofficially named the Terminator by the manufacturers. It is heavily armed and armoured to survive in urban combat. The AFV is armed with 4 9M120A attacker missile launchers and 2 30mm 2A42 autocannons, 2 AG-17D grenade launchers, and 1 coaxial 7.62 PKTM machine gun. So they are pretty heavily loaded with armaments, but there's not many of these. They were kind of heavily touted as being this amazing bit of kit, and they have lost a number of them now. But anyway, yeah, so there was one that was taken out in this attack, but you can go and check that out. There's a video there that I can't really show you because it has lots of dead bodies and whatnot in it as well. Okay, moving on, a HIMARS strike on what's claimed to be a Russian 1K148 Yastreb AV artillery reconnaissance complex. And why I am including this as a video is because this is incredibly high value. So taken out by HIMARS there, you can see it sort of blown up there. These are worth $250 million. This is a pretty expensive piece of kit. Defense Ministry has announced on Tuesday that Russian troops in Ukraine have received about 250 million counter battery. That's $250 million counter battery radar system designed to detect the trajectory of, and that's going to be artillery and whatnot. Oh goodness, I can't even go and check that out now. Annoying. Thanks, Business Insider. But you get the idea. It's counter battery radar system. And that has been taken out by HIMARS, so good strike there. Then there was a car bomb in Luhansk. I don't know who was in it, don't know what the situation is there, but this is coming out at the moment. Likely the target is a high-ranking collaborator, says War Translated, but don't know at the moment. Early doors, that's just sort of happened. Then we move on to distant strikes. Ukrainian Air Force reports a massive drone strike last night, 135 launched. So the latest figures I've got from this are out of the 135, 80 were shot down, 44 taken out with electronic warfare. So that's 124. 2 were sent back to Belarus, so they would have been spoofed. That's 126. That leaves us 19. And 9 still flying when this update was released. So that leaves 10 having definitely got through, and maybe some more out of the 9 still flying. Who knows? That's pretty good out of 135. That's a really big, overwhelming swarm of drones, or big wave of drones. And that size of drone wave is in order to overwhelm the air defenses. So for the air defenses to still operate at that level is pretty good. Now, what we would have seen like 2 years ago, a year ago even, was missiles, massive waves of missiles to accompany this. It's a really important question as to why we're not seeing that. And it has to come down to, you would if you could, you answer you can't. Right? You would be sending missiles if you could. You aren't sending missiles, so you probably can't. And let's look at Dell's stats here again. Thank you very much, Ivan, for that cup of tea. Absolutely parched, to be honest. Thank you. We can see that there's this really consistent frequency of strikes back here at the beginning of war. Forget this period, because they weren't totting up the numbers there. So basically, you start from here, and really consistent strikes. Then something happened here, maybe sanctions. I don't know, but there was a period where they were unable to fire so many. Then they started firing them again, but the frequency was less. Right, they were firing fewer missiles at each kind of wave, and then there was a massive period of what one would presume would be stockpiling, so that they could do this huge wave here, right, and 2 really large waves. But actually, I don't know if that justifies all of this, so I think there might be some struggle there. And then after those huge waves, we've got some fairly low level numbers being used, and it's just, and then we waited, and there was a record breaking wave on that huge attack back was that the beginning of September, end of August? But, before there was a bit of a gap, and then after then, it's been really relatively little. Nothing in terms of missiles. Now, my guess is they'll be stockpiling again, ready for another massive wave. But the simple fact is they're not doing that at the moment. And you would normally have expected this number of drones to be accompanied by a huge number of missiles, so that these drones are overwhelming the air defenses and then the missiles get through, that kind of thing. We're not seeing it. So I think they're struggling with their missile manufacture. Or, if you want to be really positive for the Russians, they've ramped up their Shahed so much that they can have periods of sending huge amounts of Shahed and not with the missiles. It's not that the missile situation's changed, it's that the drone situation's changed and they have more of these. So they're happy to send nights of 135 drones, Shahed type drones, without sending any missiles. So that is also a plausible explanation. Okay, so we don't really have much detail at the moment of what's been hit both in Ukraine and in Russia. So those Shahed drones that did get through, don't know what they've done in terms of damage to Ukraine. But in Russia, there were some strikes over 1,000 miles east of Red Square, is a town of Kopeisk. Residents were woken up with this huge explosion. Authorities are silent, but some channels are reporting unidentified flying, unidentified flying in the sky before the blast. So that's interesting. That's a long way from Ukraine. So to be 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers east of the Red Square of Moscow. It's a huge distance from Ukraine. Okay. We have, actually, that's not for now, that's for a little while. Then there is some satellite imagery coming out of an ammunition base that was hit 10 days ago. This is one at Karachiv in Bryansk that was targeted by Ukrainian drones. Lots of imagery of that exploding at night 10 days ago. That's what it looked like beforehand. That's where it is, in Bryansk. So you've got Bryansk, you've got Kursk, and you've got Belgorod. This is the one further to the left. Or the west. So this is satellite imagery that's just come out to be able to analyze what has taken place, and you can see that some of these berms with warehouses in have been completely taken out, but also a number of them are still in working order. So I don't know how widespread that damage was. I guess we'll see at some point. Yeah, at least 2 buildings in this premises may have been affected, and a nearby field caught fire. So not the biggest amount of damage, but still good to be able to hit these things. It'd be nice to see a huge wave of drones taking out a depot like that. Okay, now moving on, we come to other bits and pieces, and everyone is talking about this morning. So, what's the claim? Nearly 11,000 North Korean troops will be ready to fight in Ukraine by November the 1st, says GUI head Kirilo Budanov. This is the intelligence guy from the Ukrainians, okay? So maybe take it with a pinch of salt, but maybe not, as we'll discuss. The first unit of 2,600 soldiers is heading to Russia's Kursk region, with more infantry currently training in eastern Russia for combat. This is a massive, massive worry, right? Okay, so what is the reaction? Is this true for a start? Well, North Korean troops are preparing to help Russia's war in Ukraine, and it's a grave security threat, says South Korea. So South Korea are verifying this, or they are making the same claim. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Pyongyang is preparing 10,000 soldiers to join Moscow's full-scale invasion. So Zelensky's saying this. The US said that they are concerned about reports that, but they're not saying it's actually happening. Well, Phillips O'Brien says unnamed US IC sources yesterday tried to say that this number was too high. So it's interesting to see Zelensky repeat the 10,000 figure for North Korean troops who are preparing to fight for Russia. We've had Budanov saying it, and then he goes on to say, Phillips O'Brien, no, South Korean intelligence is supporting the Zelensky position. I do hope this is not another major failure for the US intelligence community. So South Korean Associated Press is saying South Korean intelligence has found that North Korea has dispatched 12,000 troops to support Russia's war against Ukraine. Yonhap News reports have said. That is absolutely huge, right? That is big, big news today. North Korea are now, it appears, formally involved in the war in Ukraine. And we also have this. So footage is circulating online allegedly showing North Korean soldiers training in Russia. The head of HUR, GUR, Budanov, reported that Russia plans to send 2,600 troops, North Korean troops, to Kursk by November the 1st. So let's listen to what this guy says.
Побежали.
They're running, he says. They can't be filmed. The horde is coming, he says. Now, I to be honest, I can't tell whether they're North Korean. I'm sure someone's zoomed in and looked in greater clarity at these. I'm just speeding up a little bit. But it's 1 million of them here. New reinforcements, this guy says. This is just the beginning. There's more further. This is just the beginning. There's more further. And yeah, this is it. So what's that last bit? We've been conquered. That's it. We've been conquered. In other words, these aren't our people. Like, we've been conquered by them. The horde's coming. And the horde could be reference to sort of Genghis Khan coming from the east. Well, these are North Koreans coming from the east, arguably. So there's a lot to worry about today. This is a real, I think, escalation. Personally, I think there's a massive red lines being crossed. What are we doing in response to that? Now, the Russian army, to move on, but I think it's hard to move on from that. I think this is a huge bit of news. Russian army versus Akhmat. I mentioned Akhmat, the Chechens, before that. This man serves in the infamous 155th Brigade in Kursk. So they were the naval infantry brigade who were operating in down in near Vuhledar. They were reconstituted a number of times. Then they've been up in Kursk. They've had a bit of a hard time up there. They did have some successes, though, when they first went up there. He says that the Akhmat has really peed them off. They come before the assault like a support group, but only a moral one, or because their fighters don't go into battle. They just wait for the result. If a settlement is taken, Akhmat flies in at full speed, and if things are going poorly, they disappear without a trace. This is coming from a Russian. There is definitely this tension between the Akhmat and the conventional Russian forces. They're not particularly popular, the Akhmat, and you do see arguments, almost standoffs with guns that we've seen a number of times. Anyway, that's enough from me. This is the first of a number of videos I'll be doing today, as ever. But to remind you of the Jake Bro live chat I'll be having at 6 p.m. UK time, please check that out. Thank you so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share, and do all that funky stuff. Really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you soon.